one of the things that I try to do with people is really help them understand their zone of genius. So often there's the zone of incompetence, which is there are things you just don't know how to do, so you don't do them. Then there's the zone of competence, which are things that you know how to do, but are really so far below where you add value to the organization. The dangerous zone is the zone of excellence. These are the things that you do know how to do, you have the competence, and you do add value to the organization, but it's nowhere close to where you add the most value.
Welcome to the Strategy at Scale podcast, brought to you by Scaling Up, Outthinker, and the Growth Institute. I'm your host, Kaihan Krippendorff. Our mission is to cut through a sea of conflicting business advice and get to what actually works. We talk to entrepreneurs and business builders who've successfully scaled companies across industries to extract proven high-impact strategies for building long-term value. You just heard from Brian Brault, our guest. He's not only a world-class entrepreneur, he's also a close friend and someone I deeply respect. Brian is a seasoned business builder, a former global chair of the Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO, and an active coach and advisor to entrepreneurial teams around the world. For those of you who may not know, EO is a global network founded in 1987 by Vern Harnish of over 18,000 entrepreneurs across more than 60 countries. So leading that organization is no small feat. Brian served at the very top, guiding the organization to support founders across the globe, lead, grow, and make an impact. Before that, he built Advanced Facilities Services International, scaling it from a startup to a nationally recognized company, and later co-founded Pure Wellness, a pioneer in creating allergy-friendly environments in hotel rooms and homes. He successfully scaled, exited, and reinvented businesses multiple times, always with a focus on purpose. Now, through his work at Legacy of Significance, Brian helps entrepreneurs step back from the grind and reconnect with what really matters: clarity, contribution, and legacy. He's worked with leadership teams from across the globe, helping them align vision, culture, and values, not just for growth, but for meaningful growth. So Brian has both been in the stadium and coached hundreds of entrepreneurs in that stadium. In this episode, we cover the difference between building a business and managing one, and why most visionary founders struggle with this shift, what it means to operate in your zone of genius, and how to spot when you're stuck in a zone of near excellence, why culture always starts with the leader, and how Brian learned this the hard way, how to create a culture of accountability without micromanagement, and what to do when your head says go, but your heart just isn't in it. Whether you're building your first company or rethinking your leadership approach, this conversation offers a masterclass in entrepreneurial self-awareness and scale-ready leadership. Let's dive in with Brian Brault. Well, Brian, it is such a pleasure to have you here with us. I've known you for a long time. Much of your coaching has opened up things for me, and you do such powerful coaching for entrepreneurs all around the world. It's really a gift for us to get all that wisdom here in one place and with one person. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this for a while. So thanks for having me.
So I know that you really take a holistic view of both the leader and a company. Here we're talking about one aspect of entrepreneurship, strategy, as opposed to, say, execution or cash or people, but they all intertwine. We're going to focus on kind of one aspect. You have been an entrepreneur and been coaches to entrepreneurs, and let's just start off with the first kind of step of maybe entrepreneurship, which is identifying an opportunity. What do you think are entrepreneurs who are successful at identifying that this is an opportunity that is really worth committing to growing a business in? What are some of the indicators for them that it is an opportunity?
Great question. I think, Kaihan, it's, opportunity isn't just about growth trends or market size. It's really about being aligned with something that's really important to you. Building a business is not easy, and it has all sorts of demands. And, you talk about strategy specifically, and not necessarily the people, the execution, or the cash side. But the reality is that strategy, like you said, needs to include all of those things. And so, because your strategy has to take into account the people you have, the people you need, the positions you need. You need to be able to fund your growth in a way that you feel good about, and then you need to actually deliver on it. But with all that said, when you're looking at all those things, one of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur, I think, is um, every day you wake up and you go to work and you put your heart and your soul into building your business. And if your mind and your heart aren't aligned, it doesn't matter how hard you work. There's going to come a point where um, it's just not worth it, because you're not in integrity with who your purpose of being on this earth. So for me, it's a combination of all those things, because you talk about opportunity, and
Well,
there are a
I
lot.
will. I think we can go where I think you're going, which is like, yeah, there's the kind of measurable, tangible, external stuff. What's the total addressable market? Is there a customer need? How much is it growing? Or do we have pricing power? All that stuff, right? But let's imagine the entrepreneur has identified many such opportunities, and now they're thinking, which is the opportunity for me? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs will jump onto it, and me will get excited about an idea. And I've actually seen this many times. Sometimes people will come to me with an idea and we want to do it together. And then they kind of lose the passion pretty quickly, because it was something that they want to do, as opposed to something that they really wanted to do. And so I kind of feel like there is this inner work to understand what you're really for, or what you really want, or something like that. If that's where you were alluding to, I'm happy to explore that.
And I've never said this out loud outside of a conversation with maybe my wife. And that is, I look at the three businesses that I've built. The first business was so aligned with who I am and what's important to me in the world, because of the way we executed on it, not necessarily what we were doing. My first business started out as a specialized cleaning business, which was really more about, when I really look back, Kaihan, it was about taking care of other people's needs. There were people who had needs that they couldn't figure out how to address, and I was creative and figured out ways to solve their needs. I had never in my life had a passion for any type of cleaning or maintenance or construction. It's just, that's not what drives me. What drives me is serving others. What drives me is taking care of, like, stepping in and being the hero and figuring things out when other people couldn't, and building teams to be able to do that. And so that's really what drove me. So my first
You're
business.
talking about advanced facilities services,
Correct.
right?
Yep. Advanced facility services grew into, really, in our area, one of the first companies that was a total facility service company, which means it dealt with everything from light construction to janitorial, lawn maintenance, snow removal, relamping, painting, parking lot sweeping, anything related to running a facility. And that's what that grew into. And
Or for commercial, or for residential, or
primarily commercial. If it was residential, it would have been for large homeowner associations. So where in Florida, we would go into a neighborhood that had 1,500 homes, and we would take care of all their landscaping needs and irrigation needs and things like that. But when I look back now on really what kind of business we were in the business of solving problems for people, and making them happy. That's really what we were in the business, and we just happened to do it through taking care of commercial properties, and solving needs that other people couldn't. And as we built that business, because we just always were committed to providing an incredible customer experience, and doing it with the highest of quality, because we wanted, it's innate in me to please other people. And I just happened to do that through building that business. Now, the problem is, it wasn't the sexiest business in the world, and so there came a point where my ego started to be a little a little impacted when I was younger. And so when I was given the opportunity to look at the second business opportunity with creating these special wellness rooms in hotels, pure rooms, uh, that was a global opportunity. It was dealing with hotel executives. It was getting on planes and traveling around the world. And so I got distracted by a shiny, sexier object, so to speak. And it pulled me away from my core focus of my original business, and really distracted me. And that was, but my heart and my passion was never in that second business, never in that second business. Yet it allowed me to really distract myself. And so when I look at my first business, my heart and passion was in it because daily it was an opportunity to step in and be a hero and make people happy. And then I built really strong teams around that to execute on that. We got to 300 employees, and businesses in the Northeast and Southeast of the United States with never having a sales force. Um, my recent business, Legacy of Significance, is really where, at this point in my life, all my passion is. I love what I do every day. Every day I get up excited to work because I know that I'm able to make an impact in people's lives through helping them develop leadership teams, strategy, focus on a culture of execution, accountability, and helping build the life they want. Go ahead. Sorry.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing is that I'm going to replay what I heard and correct me. So in both your first and your second business, you are cleaning spaces, taking care of people. In the first business, you're actually going in and doing it and seeing it. With Pure, it's more setting up channels to get these things into hotels, but you're not in the hotel room or not with the people that you're serving. Is that the difference?
Correct. And the other thing is that what we learned is that what we were experts in what we executed on and delivered isn't where the value was for our hotel customer. In other words, really kind of understanding what our competitive advantage was. We provided a product that our customers used as a competitive advantage. They weren't necessarily overly interested in what we were, customers being hotels and then their clients, their guests. So what hotels viewed us as is a competitive advantage because they were able to provide something that their competitive set was not, and they were able to charge a premium for these rooms because there was something different about them. So it really came down to the financial wealth, the financial strength of our customers. It wasn't really about what we were doing. It wasn't so being as passionate about what we were providing them was diminished because what we thought we were delivering to them was this environment where people could travel and breathe easier and live better, which was really what we were about, making lives better for people who travel with allergies and asthma. Wasn't really what the hotels were buying our product for.
Yes. Got it. I just want to help people visualize it. So I was at a Hilton hotel in Philadelphia, and it just so happened I didn't pick the room because it was a Pure room, but I walked in, I saw a device. It was an air filter. It said Pure on it. And so because I know the business, but I guess you would have other kind of indicators, right? Like when someone would check in, they would say, you can take this room or a regular room, or you can take this room, which is a Pure room, which has, what does it have? It has got sheets that have been sanitized and the air filter, and what are the things you put in the room to make
those rooms went through a 7-step patented process that created an extremely healthy environment as it relates to indoor air quality, where it's in special hypoallergenic encasements around the mattresses and the pillows. Every surface in the room was deep cleaned and sanitized. There was a medical grade air purifier in the room, which not only filtered out product, but in the air, or particulate in the air, but killed 98 to 100% of all viruses and bacteria in the air. All the surfaces were treated in the room so that viruses and bacteria and allergens couldn't survive on those surfaces. Yeah, very elaborate process.
Yes. So what do you do? I wonder what you coach entrepreneurs all the time, and you meet entrepreneurs who say, "Look, I started this business. I thought my heart was in it. It's just not in it." How do they make the assessment? Do they reconnect with the passion, or do they step away? How do they know what their passions really are? I do often see people think their passion is something, and because it's not really their passion, then they kind of switch. What do you do in that situation?
Well, so one of the great question, by the way, and one of the things that I try to do with people is really help them understand their zone of genius. Um, their zone of so often there's the zone of incompetence, which is there are things you just don't know how to do, so you don't do them. Then there's the zone of competence, which are things that you know how to do, but are really so far below where you add value to the organization. The dangerous zone is the zone of excellence. These are the things that you do know how to do, you have the competence, and you do add value to the organization, but it's nowhere close to where you add the most value. Um, the zone of genius is where you lose track of time. You just, you sit and say, okay, I'm going to spend a half hour on this. And all of a sudden, 2.5 hours later, you realize, oh my gosh, I got caught up in this. And yet you were in flow. You were producing. It's where you add value to the organization more than anyone else. And it's where your passion is. And so often with entrepreneurs, I'll tell people, hey, listen, you don't, and actually most often when it comes to like weekly accountability meetings, I strongly urge the visionary entrepreneur to not be the person who runs those meetings, because it's not in our nature to be focused on a strict culture of accountability. We go off on tangents. And so, get someone who can stay focused, stay true to what the purpose of those meetings are, what the agenda is, and that, hey, the organization has set these priorities. Let's make sure we're staying focused on those, and that people are doing what they say they're going to do. And if they're not, let's figure out what's going on and what we need to do to course correct. And visionary entrepreneurs might be good at that for a meeting or two, but then we kind of fall off the rails and get distracted easily. So to answer your question, what I try to do is help entrepreneurs to understand, what are you truly passionate about as it relates to this business? Go back. Why did you start this business? What got you brought into it? For me, when I talked earlier about the shift from advanced facility services into pure wellness, it was exciting. It was new. The business was sexier. The business was more global. The business was
techie too.
Yeah, there was just everything about it felt like, hey, I'm not rolling up my sleeves and going out and doing, doing, manual labor in the middle of the night, or because someone called in sick, or I'm not going in and just cleaning up some disaster somewhere. I'm really able to use my mind and my passion to build something. The challenge for me was in that business is that, as the CEO and the visionary, I was building a business. And so I was meeting with all these customers. But for me, what would happen is I was dealing with the decision makers in hotel ownership groups, hotel management companies. And what would happen is once the decision to buy was made, they handed it off to other people and I handed it off to other people. So I had no ability to sit and nurture and develop relationships, which is what feeds me. Building relationships, genuinely connecting with people is really what feeds me. And I didn't have that in that business. I brought it, I got on that first date and then moved on.
I love this statement. It really hits me hard. Is excellence is the most dangerous because you're good at it, but it's not really what you're meant to do. It doesn't get you in the zone.
You and I have talked about that. You and I have talked about that with you. There's certain things that you're really good at and impactful, but it's you when you look at it and step back and say, is that going to give me energy 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And that's kind of where it's one of the filters I use now is if I'm about to step into something, am I going to be just as excited 2 or 3 years from now doing this as I am today? And if the answer is I'm not really sure, then I probably don't go down that
Gotcha.
path.
Is there any like exercise or inquiry? Maybe it's just answering that question that you suggest the CEO consider before they pull the trigger to see if they will get a chance to operate in their zone of genius rather than excellence.
I would probably, and I'm just, I'm going to answer this as if you were one of my coaching clients and you say, "Hey, Brian, I'm stuck. Here's an opportunity, but I want to really think through this." I would say, I would ask you, what is it about this opportunity that truly, truly excites you? And you would answer that however you're going to answer that. And then and really regardless of what your answer is, you may say, "Hey, it's an opportunity to build another business and I love building businesses and building teams." Well, great. Then let's look out 3 years from now and say, "Okay, you've built this business. You've started to gain traction and it's doing well. What can we do and is there an opportunity to do that that allows you to still feel like you're building a business and you're building high performing teams?" And the answer is correct, correct, 100%. And I actually had that. I had built my first advanced facility services. I had reached my goals, and it was a great company to be in. But I can remember walking into work one day and looking at my calendar for the day, and not wanting to do anything that was on it was. And I had noticed that I'd start coming in a little bit later, not incredibly late, but if I used to get in at 7, I was starting to get in at 8:30, and I just didn't have the same passion I once did because I was running the business. What we ended up doing, Kaihan, which is really, I think, what accelerated us the most was, uh, I have a belief that everybody has at least a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit in them. And if you think back, pre-industrial revolution, pretty much everyone was an entrepreneur, kind of. You kind of had to be. Society required us to be, and then the Industrial Revolution changed all that. Provided,
Yeah, I looked at that.
uh,
The word like the word job didn't start being popularized until the 1920s and 1940s. Before that, everyone was sort of a gig worker. You fix clocks and you farmed and you fix shoes and you just made it happen.
you did something that other people needed that allowed you to trade or barter or sell and use that money to do what you wanted to do. And so, I believe that still innate as human beings, everyone has a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit in them. And so what I did was I took our whole business and I said, let's look at we had two geographic locations. So we took our Florida division and just separated that as a separate entity, not legally, but within our organization, set a separate entity, and create its own business there. And we had a general manager of that division. Then we took the divisions based in Western New York and said, what are the different types of businesses that we do that really don't intersect a ton? And we set up 5 different individual businesses. And so what we ended up with was like 6 small businesses. We provided leadership oversight at an executive level. We provided accounting services as support for them, and human resources support for them. But other than that, they were like their own little businesses, and the general managers were treated as entrepreneurs. They were given, they had to fit within our culture and fit within legal guidelines, but they were allowed to and encouraged and empowered to make the decisions to run those organizations like their own individual businesses. And I think that's when we really took off and scaled from, by a factor of 8 over a period of 4 years. It was pretty
Wow,
substantial.
I love that. I love that. And where was that? That was with which company?
Advanced facility services.
That's a very
Yeah.
progressive model. So maybe we just talk a little bit now on org design, because you touched on it, in culture. And maybe we start with culture there, because you could say, you find the opportunity. There's a market opportunity, but it fits in my zone of genius, and it's something that I really have my heart in. I think that gives you a competitive advantage. I hear what I hear you saying is like that will give you the competitive advantage, because you'll be the one that's willing to work harder than anyone else. And so let's say those two things come true, and now you're deciding, who am I going to hire? What's my culture going to be? What's my org structure going to be? What do you want? What do you start with?
I so I view that leaders need to make sure that the people they're leading can answer three questions. The first of which is, where are we going? And where are we going is that very clearly articulated vision. I mean, very clear. It's been referred to as the painted picture or the vivid vision. But great picture, absolutely. So Brian is probably one of the best in the world at really leveraging this whole approach of a painted picture, to the point where you can read it, I can read it, everyone on our team can read it, and they see the same thing. That's the level of detail those painted pictures have. So where are we going? What is that clearly articulated vision? When everyone understands that, we then take a step and say, who do we really need to have in here to say, okay, if that's where we're going, what do we need to do to get there? And that's where strategy comes in. What do we need to do to get from where we are today to what this clearly articulated vision is? And then I really like to bring in a broader group of people for that. That's not just the three or four leaders. I view that as, that's a broader group of people that because it's the broader group that's actually going to execute on that. So then once we know where we're going and what we need to do to get there, which is the strategic plan, what is my role? So everyone in the organization, from the CEO to the person who just got hired for the front lines yesterday, understands what their role is in executing on that strategy to reach the vision. And then from there, we create a culture of accountability. And the culture of accountability really comes down to when we develop structures of how to, once we develop the strategy and everyone understands their role is, okay, who is accountable to execute on this particular strategy? And then we say, okay, if in the next 90 days you're going to achieve this, what needs to happen over the next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks? And those are called milestones or sub accountabilities. And what are the items and what are the dates? And if you're accountable for it, you determine all of those things. We don't impose that on people. So if I'm working with you and you say, I'm going to achieve this year, and here's what I commit to achieve in the next 90 days to be on track to reach that annual goal, I would say, okay, Kaihan, break that down in terms of weekly or every other week milestones you need to reach that, and determine the dates. You determine what they are and what the dates are. So these are not imposed on you. Those are you. Then when you come into our weekly meetings, we simply look at it and say, okay, here's the things that were due by today. And so when it comes to Kaihan, I would say, okay, Kaihan, you said you would have this done today. Is it done? And if the answer is yes, I would ask you, hey, is there anything that you need to share regarding that for the betterment of the group? Most of the time, the answer is no. It's been talked about several times. And so we move on. It's a 3-second interaction. If your answer is no, you have not met a deadline that you gave. The question is, there's 4 questions, and the first, and we write them on a wall so people see them. It's not personal. It's not judgment. It's what happened, and we wait until you give an answer. And what I mean by that is, we wait. It could be 5 seconds. It could be 2 minutes. But we just, hey, what happened? Hey, listen, we're a team here. Just tell us what happened. Maybe you got sloppy. Maybe you misjudged time. Maybe some emergency happened. You weren't able to do it. Whatever it is. The resources weren't available for you to do it. You didn't think through that, whatever it is. What happened? Then the next question is, okay, when is a date that you can 100% commit to meeting this deadline by? And you decide that date. The third question is there any collateral impact on something else in the organization, your own accountabilities, other people's accountabilities? Is there any collateral impact from not reaching this deadline on time? And then the fourth one is, which comes back to culture, is what can this team do to support you in being successful? Because we succeed as a team, we fail as a team. So what happened? What date can you 100% recommit to? Is there any other collateral impact from not reaching this goal? And what can we do to support you? Same questions every single time. And so, I want to come back to culture a little bit. Culture for me is leadership drives culture, and culture is happening and occurring and developing, whether you're conscious about it or not. It is happening because it is really a product of how people show up. So, I mean, for me, like, core values are something that are not aspirational. Core values are something you discover. So very often the leader, like, you think of yourself and Pilar and your family. The way you live and the way you show up and your natural instincts and your default behaviors, as well as Pilar's, that is the culture of your family. That is the core values of your family, because it's the way you are when nobody's looking. Nobody's going to know. It's just, it's how you show up, and you can't hide that for very long. In organizations, leadership, and it's usually the entrepreneur, the visionary leader, very often, almost always, drives the culture of the organization because it's how they show up. Do you resist difficult conversations? Do you accept less than perfect work because it's the cheaper way to get it done and the customer's never going to know? Do you treat people well, or do you treat people as objects? I mean, those are just things that either you do or you don't. And when your back is against the wall, which it will happen in business, when you're under pressure, which it happens in business, you're going to step back into your default behaviors, and that drives culture. That tells people.
So let me ask you as sort of like a logical question. So I can see culture emerges, and what I'm hearing is sort of it emerges naturally, and then you might name it. And I hear you also say that a leader drives culture, and a leader might have kind of cultural norms that are not helpful, treating people like objects. So I guess implicit in there is either that's the wrong leader and leader needs to be replaced, or the leader can learn, can become self-aware, and can adopt a new set of behaviors. So then does that mean, therefore, that you might observe the culture and you might name it, and then you might say, but that's not the right culture. We need to have this culture, or there's some element of the culture we change. And so can cultures change?
I think cultures can change, because culture will change on leadership. And I've had it change in a bad way. Back with advanced facility services, probably the single biggest professional mistake of my career, which is 40 years at this point, was underestimating the impact that the visionary leader has on culture. And so I stepped away and replaced myself in my role in that company to build Pure Wellness Rooms. I replaced myself with a really, really strong operations person, probably the best operations person I've ever seen. But the shift in what their responsibilities were less about execution on certain projects and more about visionary leadership and driving the organization and empowering others, and really, being the person that nurtured and empowered other leaders, he wasn't the right person. And he became more when I was CEO of Advanced Facility Services, I basically had one primary rule for any leader in the organization is you do not need my permission to do anything as long as it was legal that unless you are going to tell a customer, no, we can't do this for you, then I need to be involved in that. And there was only one time. And literally within 5 minutes of someone saying, hey, we've been asked to do this, we just don't have the resources to do it. There's just no way. And so I said, well, let's just get these three people on this call and see what we can do. And within 5 minutes, we had the resources we need and we took care of it. To the point, Kaihan, that what I said to people is, even if we can't be the company that takes care of them, let's go with some of our competitors that we have good relationships with that we know can take care of them and let them take care of them. We want our customers to know they can make one phone call to us and their problem's going to be addressed, even if it's not us that shows up. So that transition for me was I was very focused on people. I genuinely care about the people I lead. I knew who they were. I knew what was going on in their life and the families. We had 300 employees. And because I would go in and I would sit and talk with people, I would go on job sites. The person that I replaced myself with was much more focused on the bottom line. And it shifted our culture. Our team felt it. Our customers felt it. And it was a really expensive lesson for me, emotionally and financially. So back to your original question is, can culture be learned? Well, can culture be changed by having someone learn? And, I think there's a couple things. One is, I think people can learn and become aware of just about anything. What I'm not sure can happen as much is recognizing, hey, you may become aware of something, you may be able to learn about something, but if you truly can't change this, then either we need to move you into a position where that's not going to be impactful, or we need to move you out of the organization. Now, the challenge is when you're the founder, you're the owner, you can't really move yourself out. And that requires an incredible amount of maturity and self-awareness and willingness to have someone give you, tell the emperor you're not wearing any clothes, because that requires a lot. But if someone, and sometimes that's my role as a coach to say, hey, listen, you're not the right person to run these meetings. You're not the right person to do this. You're extremely talented in things that is important to the company, but it's not this. And you don't hold people accountable. And as a result, you're not meeting your objectives and you're getting frustrated with them, but it's your fault.
Yeah. Well, let's do ask you a question. I don't know. I don't think you and I have ever spoken about, so I don't know if this is something that you think about or experience with, but you have the leader, and then another leader that may be above that leader is the investor. So I would think that depending on what type of investor, if they're an involved investor or they're an investor that has a particular reputation, that can also influence the culture. So do you ever think about who the right investors are?
Yeah. And, and it's really important to understand that so often investors, at a recent executive education program that we were running, we actually had a session on how does private equity or venture capital view entrepreneurial businesses differently than the entrepreneur does. And it is very different. And, it is, so having, understanding what level of influence or a level of governance rights the investor has is going to be a really important part of that, because it's their money. They're putting their money at stake. So they certainly have the right to have some influence. They certainly have the right to have some sort of a governance. The only time someone may not want any kind of government, elevated governance rights or influence is if they just look at it and say, oh my gosh, this team is absolutely perfect. There's really nothing I can bring to them other than they need some cash. And their goals are very aligned with what my goals are. We're looking to scale the organization, drive shareholder value, and that's their primary objective. And then maybe someone might say, "Hey, listen, I've known you for a long time. I've invested with you before. This is a new venture. I trust you 100%. Here's the money. Just give me my return." Doesn't happen all that often, but sometimes it does. Most of the time, it's you've got something great here. My money and my influence can scale this business more than you can see it will. And what happens often with entrepreneurs is their ego sees huge opportunity and they're looking at the end goal and they don't realize what it's going to take to get there. And usually the changes needed to get from where you are to where this investor can help you get to requires a fundamental change in where you derive satisfaction, what drives you, and so really having an investor that aligns with and understands what it is you're truly trying to achieve and what's important to you to get in terms of how you get there, I think is really important. Otherwise, you're creating a you're creating a recipe for disaster.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think I think that's something that I think is maybe under addressed in entrepreneurial literature. I think we make kind of fast decisions when we get an investor lined up and interested. Like we can make slow decisions about who are we going to hire and how are we going to organize and be thoughtful about. But sometimes the investor choice is just whoever I can get and at what terms. All right, we're reaching the top of our time with you. Last two questions. Is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have asked? And what's the answer to that? And how can people connect and learn from you?
Boy, any questions you didn't ask?
There are many, but what would be something that?
Yeah, no. I'm just, good question. I think, maybe just, about, opportunities, when is the right opportunity? When do you go after opportunities that might make sense? I mean, it's very easy to let your ego drive, going after opportunities. I can remember with Advanced Facility Services, there was HSBC Bank. HSBC Bank was headquartered here at the time. The North American headquarters was in Western New York, and they had a very large footprint of all their branch locations and operating locations. And they were looking to outsource total facility services. It's the first time they had ever done it, and it was still early on in companies doing that. And so they were looking for one company to handle all their the actual delivery of services, not the managing of the properties, but the delivery of services. And so I wanted to bid on it. And our entire leadership team said, we are not equipped to handle that. And I said, we probably aren't. But the experience that we will get, this is an area that we're looking to get into. This is an area where we have the competence to deliver the service, but maybe not the experience or the size to execute as well as we could, or as well as what would be expected. We went through and we just said, let's just give it our best shot. And we went in and we were against global organizations bidding. There was no other small companies our size. We were the smallest company bidding on this. And we went in and we were creative, we were innovative, and we bid on this, and we were actually offered the bid. against all these global players. Problem was they said, we would like you to be the company, but the next lowest bid is half of what you bid. If you're willing to do it for that, we'd like it to be you. And we declined it. 2 years later, they came back and matched our price. And we had that contract for a long, long, long time until I sold the business. Yeah.
Knowing your numbers, knowing the facts, and knowing, I read this quote recently that you're not right because other people agree you're right. You're right because your belief is supported by the facts. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast we could go into around entrepreneurs using their gut. Because it's kind of summarized, but what you just said is, listen, first of all, the era of Jack Welch for leaders, of the smartest person in the room evolves to be the leader, has shifted. And it's now, the person with the highest emotional intelligence. It's the person who genuinely cares about the people they're leading and also is really good at building teams. Those are the people who are evolving in leadership. And it's Discover Your True North by Bill George is the author of what? Yeah, Bill George is the author of Discover Your True North, and that's what that first chapter is about. However, the other thing too is with data and information is becoming so easily accessible these days that you have the intellectual side of leadership available to you at your fingertips. It's bringing the intellect and the data into the decisions that you make is really where the magic is.
That's a great point. That is a great point. Amazing. Well, Brian, we opened the door to several hallways that we could explore, and maybe we'll get a chance to do that in another podcast. But we've reached the top of our time with you for this one. Thank you so much for generously and authentically sharing your experiences, your individual experiences, your experiences coaching so many other entrepreneurs and leadership teams. How can people connect with you and learn from you and get opportunities to work with you?
Well, sure. My either through LinkedIn or which I can give you that link. You can put it in the notes. My email address is Brian, BRIAN, at life, LIFE -bydesign.com. So Brian at life-bydesign.com.
Great. Brian, thank you so much for your time again. And I hope I get to see you in person soon.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Strategy at Scale. Thanks to our guest, Brian Brault, our producer, Oscar Perez, and our teams at Scaling Up, Outthinker, and Growth Institute. If you like what you heard, please download and subscribe. I'm Kaihan Krippendorff. We'll catch you soon with another episode of Strategy at Scale.